Let's begin. All right. Welcome everyone to our podcast. My name is Lynette Morales.
And I am Marcel Abadia.
Today, Marcel will be interviewing me on an excerpt from Imbolo Mbue's Behold the Dreamers, a novel that explores immigration, the American dream, and class dynamics. In this specific episode, we'll be analyzing a passage that captures Jende Jonga's experience during a pivotal moment. Jende is a Cameroonian immigrant who's lived in the United States for 2 years working menial small jobs like dishwashing and etc. During these 2 years, he saves up enough money to bring his girlfriend Nenny and their son Leomi to the United States with him. Jende now seeks work at Clark Edwards' office and an investment bank in Manhattan. Today we'll be zooming in and focusing on this specific scene where we see Jende nervous and anxious about to arrive for his new job interview. The scene beautifully blends anticipation, isolation, and the pressures of assimilation. But first, let's read the excerpt out loud.
All right, let's dive in.
Okay, here's the excerpt. Alone in the elevator to the 20th floor, he inspected his fingernails. No dirt, thankfully. He adjusted his clip-on tie using the security mirror above his head, re-examined his teeth, and found no visible remnants of the fried ripe plantains and beans he'd eaten for breakfast. He cleared his throat and wiped off whatever saliva had crusted on the sides of his lips. When the doors opened, he straightened his shoulders and introduced himself to the receptionist, who, after responding with a nod and a display of extraordinarily white teeth, made a phone call and asked him to follow her. They walked through an open space where young men in blue shirts sat in cubicles with multiple screens, down a corridor, past another open space of cluttered cubicles, and into a sunny office with a four-paneled glass window running from wall to wall and floor to ceiling. The thousand autumn-drenched trees and proud towers of Manhattan standing outside. For a second, his mouth fell open at the view outside, the likes of which he'd never seen, and the exquisiteness inside. There was a lounging section, black leather sofa, two black leather chairs, glass coffee table to his right, an executive desk, oval, cherry, black leather reclining chair for the executive, two green leather armchairs for visitors in the center, and a wall unit, cherry glass doors, white folders in neat rows. To his left, in front of which Clark Edwards, in a dark suit, was standing and feeding sheets of paper into a pull-out shredder. That's our excerpt for today.
And there's so much to unpack here. Jende's preparation in the intimidating environment and the mixture of his awe and anxiety really stand out. Let's start with Mbue's language. The meticulous way Jende checks his fingernails, adjusts his clip-on tie, and examines his teeth. These small details reflect his nervousness and careful preparation.
Exactly. These actions emphasize how deliberate his preparation has been, almost like he's rehearsing for a sort of performance. When he's alone in the elevator to the 20th floor, that isolation is especially accentuated. He isn't just physically alone, but it symbolizes his journey as an immigrant navigating this new and unfamiliar world.
And when he steps into the office, the imagery is stunning. Phrases like autumn-drenched trees and proud towers of Manhattan highlight his awe. It's a moment of aspiration, but also a subtle reminder how out of place he might feel.
Definitely. He's both in awe, but still very, very anxious. I also think the very detailed description of Jende making his way through the office to find Clark Edwards is very telling of the overstimulation and fear that he might have been feeling at the time. He takes note of every single detail he sees. For example, the cluttered cubicles, paneled glass windows, oval cherry black leather reclining chair for the executive, two green leather armchairs for visitors, etc. These are all such vivid and specific images. Jende is not simply focused on his job interview, but he's taking in every single new detail of this new world that he's entering. Mbue could have just simply described this moment as Jende making his way through several open spaces to reach Clark Edwards' luxurious office, but she really chose to hone in on every single detail, really putting the reader into the mind of Jende at the time. Okay, let's move on to some discussion of the tone. So the tone of awe mixed with the anxiety captures his mindset super well. He's determined, but there's underlying insecurity still. I feel like this reflects heavily on the immigrant experience of stepping into a world where success feels possible at times, but still very uncertain.
How do you think that Mbue's close third-person perspective immerses us in Jende's thoughts?
I feel like the author's use of a closed third person perspective makes Jende's aspirations and self-doubt feel so real and palpable. It's like we're right there with him, feeling that same mix of hope and hesitation.
Now we should move on to the thematic significance, right?
Yeah,
Can you tell me more about how this excerpt speaks to some of the broader topics Imbalo Mbue is trying to portray?
absolutely. One of the main themes in this novel is the idea of the American dream. So we all know that the classic American dream is owning a house with a white picket fence, having 2.5 kids and financial stability, being able to retire someday. But Umbwe uses Behold the Dreamers to challenge the idea of this American dream. Although it's presented like a sort of promise, the American dream isn't really equal for all people. For example, Jende's careful preparation, making sure that there's no trace of, quote, fried ripe plantains and beans that he ate, shows the pressure to assimilate and fit into a space that often excludes people like him. I think that it also I think this is also exemplified through the visual of the young men in blue shirts sat in cubicles with multiple screens. It shows Jende that you have to be like everyone else in order to achieve this American dream. There isn't any individuality within these workers. They're just simply young men in blue shirts. But in reality, as hard as he could try, I feel like we eventually see that this American dream isn't really his. And he eventually sees this himself. He decides to leave America due to witnessing the internal unhappiness that comes with the American dream when he sees the family of the Edwards and their internal struggles. And he also has to go through several trials and tribulations because he's an immigrant and he realizes that the American dream isn't truly his.
Yeah, absolutely. And what theme do you think the portrayal of the office symbolizes? It's luxurious, pristine, really clean, and completely different to what Jende's world might be.
I think that the contrast is so stark. I believe it especially highlights class disparities, which is another theme heavily focused on by Mbue. The main way that our author shows this class disparity in this novel is through the juxtaposition of the Edwards family and Jendy's family. But even just in this exact excerpt, we see the same separation shown through the unfamiliarity and luxury of this office space. I think another detail in this specific excerpt that shows class disparity, not just between Jende and this new world, but also internally in this company between Clark Edwards and the employees working for him, is the actual description of the office itself. So when Jende first walks in, he is he walks into an open space, lots of cubicles, lots of clutter, right? There's not much individuality there, just a lot of young men in blue shirts. Um, and then from there, he goes into Clark Edwards' office, and then the description becomes a lot more luxurious and specific. So that he has four paneled glass windows running from wall to wall, floor to ceiling. That's usually synonymous with like luxury, high-rise buildings, that sort of thing. The proud Manhattan Towers standing outside, they're visible from inside. It's kind of a reminder of where he's like brought himself, right? So this like high class mentality. Um, Also the description of just like the seating section itself, so specific, but it shows the separation between Clark Edwards and the guests that would be presumably like seated in there. It says that there is a black leather sofa, two black leather chairs, a coffee table, and then he has his own executive desk, oval cherry black leather reclining chair, and then there's two green leather armchairs for visitors. So he has like a big reclining chair, red, like the cherry. It's described as cherry red. Red is usually synonymous with like power and like ruling. Very like dominant color, and then green is much more passive color, and the visitors would only get armchairs, not big reclining chairs like Clark Edwards. Um, And I think this specifically is something that also shows that same class disparity, even within this new world that Jende is coming into. It's not just that he's an immigrant coming into this luxurious world, but he's an immigrant and he sees that even the people at the bottom of this world don't have it as good as the people at the top, like Clark Edwards. It can be very, very intimidating for him, like to see his whole journey of where he'll have to go to get to this American dream right in front of him. He walks right through it, past the employees that are kind of lower wage than Clark Edwards, all the way to the high class office of Clark Edwards. And he himself isn't even applying for a job as an employee at the investment institute, but he's actually just gonna he wants to be a chauffeur, right? Um, so I feel like this makes the idea of the American dream just like even more unreachable for him and really, really perpetuates that idea of class disparity. And the visual of Clark Edwards feeding papers into the shredder, I feel like it's so, so powerful. I feel like it symbolizes his intimidating and undeniable power, as well as as well as the disposability of people within the corporate structures. Jende sees Clark Edwards' employees' desks just cluttered with paper, and then he eventually sees Clark Edwards himself just casually shredding papers. It kind of just shows how easily he can get rid of the people that work for him, the product that they create, and just like all in all, their American dream, their hopes of success. It can be also very intimidating for Jende. It's a heavy reminder of who owns control. It's very intimidating for Jende as he's walking into this world.
Yeah. And Mbue uses moments like these to explore deeper issues. The psychological toll of trying to break through systematic and cultural barriers is immense. And the American dream, as we see here, is both fragile and very complex.
Exactly. The scene is just one part of Jende's story, but it really reflects the larger struggles of most, if not all, immigrants, like balancing one's identity, performing in order to assimilate, and trying to make it into a world that continually turns you away no matter how hard you try for it.
Now, we have our own interpretation of and our response to this, right? So,
Yeah,
how did this passage resonate with you?
it really made me think about times where I've had to present the quote best version of myself in intimidating situations like job interviews and important meetings. But it also makes me question whether I was really presenting the best version of myself or simply performing to fit into the standards of a world that I'm faced with. The feeling of needing to perform and to be perfect is so relatable. It also made me think of times where I felt like some sort of invisible barrier based on class disparities or some other sort of internal feeling, and perhaps not really realize that. Umboy's description of the luxurious office makes me think of times where I could feel that same sort of imposter syndrome that Jendi was feeling because I was surrounded by people of a higher class than me or people with more success than me, really anything of that sort. And I think that these feelings aren't just perpetuated by my own insecurities, but by our world as a whole. And this excerpt really helped me see that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, uh, with you, and I can totally relate. This moment Jende experiencing feels like such a universally human experience, like trying to wear a mask to get into a place where you feel like you're pushing yourself forward, but it also feels like you're not you. But within the process, you find like a new version of you. It's like a mix of a lot of different feelings.
Exactly, like specifically the idea of the American dream in this, like he's trying to fit that mask to fit into the American dream, but he ends up realizing that he has some self-discovery in what his actual own self-personal dream is. I feel like that blend of aspiration, self-doubt, and hope is something that a lot of us can connect with. All right, let's wrap this up. So, Imbolo Mbue's use of rich language and vivid imagery in this passage perfectly encapsulates the novel's core themes of immigration, class separation, and the American dream.
It's a beautiful and thought out provoking moment that invites us to reflect on our own experiences and the society that we live in.
I encourage all of you guys listening to reflect on what your own personal idea of the American dream is, who or what defines it, and how possible and tangible does that feel to you. Thank you guys all for listening, and we hope you enjoyed very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Bye bye.
Bye.